A new week, a new flurry of activity from the White House. Washington Post reporter will join us with the very latest. Then, as the White House ramps up its immigration crackdown, states and cities, they're lining up to fight it. Many of them, they're in our own backyard. Also, the state of the GOP, it is the Breitbart wing versus the establishment wing, but the question is, which one will win out? Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us this Tuesday night. Well, it's a busy day for President Trump. The president spent the morning visiting the African American History Museum, talking about how he tried to unite a divided country. President also announcing his new National Security Advisor, Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster. He's a battle-tested veteran of both the Persian Gulf War and the Second Iraq War. But today's biggest news, it is the administration's moves when it comes to immigration. The Trump administration rapidly moving forward with their immigration plans.
The president is empowering DHS to carry out the immigration laws currently on the books.
In two new memos, the detainment and deportation of undocumented immigrants has taken on a greater priority in the Department of Homeland Security. Among the actions, removing President Obama's exemptions for certain categories of undocumented immigrants, hiring a total of 15,000 new employees for immigration and customs enforcement and Customs and Border Patrol. Also, expedited deportations. But the White House says this should not be taken as setting the stage for mass deportations. The ACLU slamming the memos as confirmation that, quote, the Trump administration is willing to trample on due process, human decency, the well-being of our communities, and even protections for vulnerable children. Last week, the president again said he intends to be compassionate towards so-called dreamers, children who are brought to the U.S. by their parents. But the White House was not clear on what the policy would be.
If you're in this country in an illegal manner, that obviously that there's a provision that could ensure that you be removed. But the priority that the president has laid forward and the priority that ICE is putting forward through DHS's guidance is to make sure that the people who have committed a crime or pose a threat to our public safety are the priority of their efforts.
And the president is expected to sign a new travel ban sometime this week. Senior officials saying the same 7 majority Muslim countries are targeted, but the new draft does not have an indefinite ban on refugees from Syria. And for more on the president's latest moves here, as well as really the first month in office, let's bring in our Washington Post correspondent, Philip Bump. Let's first get not so much into the substance, but as to at least the reception on Capitol Hill as it relates to the travel ban 2.0 and also the immigration orders. Do they believe that these are finally going to be more well thought out and that there'll be both a legal and a practical operational rollout that at least has the administration on all fronts on the same page?
Well, I think the main question here, obviously we have the question of what is going to be included in the new version of this travel ban, which remains to be seen. But I mean, the broader question here is, Sean Spicer said today they're going to fight on 2 tracks. Sean Spicer, the press secretary, essentially they're going to keep fighting the existing ban in the court and try and defend that, but then issue something new that can be sort of a stopgap. There are a lot of questions, though, about whether or not the fundamental basis of what Donald Trump and the administration are trying to do here can withstand legal scrutiny, and it's not clear that it can. And he's also operating now from a political environment where people are very, very skeptical of what it is he's trying to do. There are not going to be a lot of people who are going to jump on board with this ban right off the bat, given how poorly the last one went, both politically and in the courts.
I'm curious, Phil, because in the tri-state area where folks are watching us, there's been a whole bunch of congressional town halls that have been canceled, obviously overwhelming with Republicans, because they fear some of the backlash that some of their counterparts have already ran into, and they also have, I guess, some of the visions of what Democrats 8 years ago, or at least 6 years ago, ran into when Obamacare was first rolled out to mixed receptions. Do Republicans really want the administration to double down on this? Do they think it's a winning issue politically, or would they rather it just go away?
Well, I think there's a couple of things at play here. The first is that, sort of ironically, a lot of the reason Republicans nationally are facing some condemnation at these town halls is because of Obamacare, that people want to come out and defend Obamacare, which I think is sort of ironic. But more broadly speaking, there exists a constituency which is fervently supportive of Donald Trump's efforts on immigration, and that's Donald Trump's core base of support, which is a very conservative base of Republicans. And so for folks that represent a very strongly conservative Republican district, they are going to want to be able to tell folks that they're standing with Donald Trump on this. For everyone else, I mean, the tri-state area, there are a lot of Democrats, there are a lot of moderate Republicans in that area. They're not going to necessarily want to have to go out and explain to folks why they support Donald Trump on this very, very controversial issue.
Broadly on the Hill, do Republicans worry, forget about all the optics here, which have looked largely bad for the last month, as well as some of the characters, but do they worry that, you know, you wrote a really interesting piece on how the first month was spent, not just the allocation of his time and the hours, but how much has actually gotten done? For all the talk, absence the executive orders, you know, it's been a hot mess in terms of what the agenda was going to be versus what got done. On Capitol Hill, what are you hearing from Republicans? Are they worried that the second month is going to be more of the same?
Well, I think that on Capitol Hill, elected officials recognize that legislating is not fast, that there is an extensive process you have to go through. You have to go through committees, you have to go through hearings, you have to hold these votes, it has to then go to the other chamber. I mean, the process of getting things through Congress, the process through which Donald Trump would normally, or a president would normally try and pass legislation, it is a slow thing. And I think that Donald Trump came in, you want to knock heads together, he's used to the CEO background where he's the guy in charge and he can do whatever he wants. It's not how Washington works. And I think that Republicans tried to move quickly on Obamacare, very quickly saw that they were going to get their treads stuck in the mud a little bit on that. And now they're slowing down and trying to figure out how they can do it. That's how Washington is, that it is a process of building consensus. That's not what Donald Trump is used to, and I think that's frustrating.
Now, I preface this by saying a month is not the best total frame of reference for what a four-year term will be, but nonetheless, it's not 2 days either. You did a by the numbers of how the first month went for this president and how he used his time, how much time was unaccounted for. Forget about what did and didn't get done here. It is pretty stunning when you look at the words of the candidate versus the words of the president and how he actually used his time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, again, Donald Trump had great rhetoric on the campaign trail. Oh, Barack Obama, he's not doing anything. He's out playing golf. I'm going to go in there, and Hillary Clinton's not going to have the stamina. I'm going to be working hard, yada, yada, yada. But then you look at what Donald Trump's done. He spent a quarter of his time in Mar-a-Lago down in Florida. A quarter of the past month he spent down there. He's played basically a day's worth of golf over the course of the past month, whereas he would constantly, I mean, he said last August that he wasn't going to play golf because he was going to be working all the time. There are all these ways in which, granted, there is no more high-stress job in the world than being president of the United States. And so I'm not going to fault the guy for taking some downtime by any stretch, but it is a stark contrast between what he said he was going to do and what he's actually doing. And at the same time, there hasn't been a lot of progress on Capitol Hill, as you pointed out. He's had some meetings with legislators on the Hill, but there hasn't really been a lot that's gotten done there. And I think that's probably not what he anticipated when he came into office.
I think you're being a little too polite here. The idea that you can just call going down to Mar-a-Lago the winter White House, that's a convenient way of saying, I'm going on vacation, I'm taking 3-day weekends. He's been on the job a month, and maybe it's a little personal for me because I'm going to try and get down to West Palm here next month. He already says he's going to be there through the beginning of May every weekend. I mean, for a minute, I think people should process this. I get it's a stressful gig. He's been there 1 month, and he's going to be taking 3-day weekends, Philip, for the next 2 or 3 months. This is nuts.
Well, it is. I can totally appreciate that, absolutely, and I think it's worth pointing out that he's very strategic in calling it the Winter White House because it gives this sort of veneer that he's working the entire time, which clearly isn't the case. He's trying to downplay how much time he's actually spent golfing. His team over the weekend said that he had gone out and played a couple of holes on Saturday and a couple of holes on Sunday, and then it actually turned out he played a full 18 holes on Sunday, which took 4 hours or so. So they're cognizant that this is a bad look for him. That him going out and playing golf all the time doesn't look good. That's why they say things like Winter White House. But yes, I mean, again, to my point, it undermines this idea that he has the stamina, that he's, that he is a guy who's going to constantly be pressing and working and working. But we also knew that because he spends a lot of time watching TV news. He spends a lot of time on Twitter. He spends a lot of time doing things which aren't really related to the job at hand. His days usually start at about 9 a.m. They usually end at about 6 p.m., which is, a fairly standard work day, but he's got a fairly unstandard job.
I'm sure the next month will be as eventful as the first, Philip. I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right, everybody, coming up next, the administration, it unveils its new immigration as well as deportation crackdown, and it is pitting D.C. against immigrant-friendly places like New York. It could set up a showdown with one Andrew Cuomo. Trump versus Cuomo. We'll get into that with a panel straight ahead.